If it's Friday, the presidential race resets as Vice President Harris and former President Trump agree to a showdown on the debate stage next month, and both campaigns head out west. Plus, a major new warning about foreign interference in the presidential election. Iran stepping up its efforts to sow division, creating fake news websites and accessing the email of a high-ranking official on the presidential campaign. And as the remnants of Tropical Storm Debbie drench parts of the Northeast, NBC News investigates how the increasing frequency of natural disasters is making home insurance increasingly unaffordable and sometimes unavailable. Hi there and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles. The stage is set and the race reset with less than 3 months to go to Election Day. Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump are both hitting the campaign trail today after agreeing to at least one presidential debate on September 10th. In the week since Harris rose to the top of the ticket, it wasn't clear if Mr. Trump would debate his new opponent. Now he says he's agreed to 3 debates and is challenging Harris to commit 2.
I just look forward to these debates. I think it's very important that we have them. I hope she agrees to them September 4th, September 10th, September 25th. And I think they'll be very revealing. Well,
I'm glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it and hope he shows up.
Are you open to more debates?
I am happy to have that conversation about an additional debate for after September 10th, for sure.
But before they meet on the stage next month, both candidates are bringing their message to voters on the ground. It's the first time the former president will be on the campaign trail all week. He's heading to Montana, where he'll hold a rally this evening with Republican Senate candidate Tim Sheehy, as Republicans look to flip the Senate seat in that deep red state. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris and Governor Walz continue their swing through battleground states. Today, they're holding a rally in Phoenix, Arizona, which, of course, is one of 3 swing states our friends at the Cook Political Report have put back in toss-up territory since Harris's entry into the race. They will visit another one of those states, Nevada, tomorrow. And ahead of that westward swing, and with immigration one of the top issues for voters this election, the Harris campaign's out with a new ad trying to tackle one of their biggest vulnerabilities, the border. Take a listen.
As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
And to preview what we can expect from tonight's Harris-Walz rally, NBC's Aaron Gilchrist is on the ground in Phoenix.
Well, Ryan, the arena behind me holds about 20,000 people. We'll be watching to see how large the crowd is that gathers to hear Vice President Harris and her new running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. This is a state where the campaign knows there is a diverse population. They will be trying to speak directly to young voters and to black voters and to Latino voters and also to independent voters. We know from some recent data that was published in Arizona that about 1/3 of the registered voters here are independent voters. And so the vice president will have to put some effort into convincing them that her ticket is the one that they should be voting for. We talked to voters here who say that the big issues for them in Arizona are really the economy, those issues around lowering costs and increasing incomes here. They're also concerned about reproductive freedom. That's something that we know could potentially be on the ballot or is very likely to be on the ballot here in Arizona in November. And then there are also concerns around immigration and border security. But I think, as has been the case in other places, the economy has really risen to the top as an issue for independent voters here. I want you to hear what some voters told us about that topic.
The 2 big things with her right now are immigration and economy. And I know when you're borderline in a recession like we are right now, it's not easy to swing yourself out of it.
I think it's like, for me, it's just the most benefit I can get from whoever party it is. So I'm paying attention on how it affects me directly. Who's going to put money back into my pocket as far as to make it more affordable.
And finally, it will be interesting to hear what the vice president has to say about border security and immigration. You played the ad a moment ago that's new here in Arizona, also in Nevada, but it's really a topic that Democrats have struggled to gain traction on. So As it is important here in these border states, it'll be interesting to see how the vice president addresses those issues. We know the White House put out a memo earlier today that talked about executive action that President Biden took with Vice President Harris at his side on those topics. So we'll be interested to see what she says this afternoon here in Arizona and how it resonates with the crowd that's going to be listening. Brian?
All right, Aaron, thank you for that. And joining me now from the White House is NBC's Monica Alba, and Vaughn Hilliard is in Bozeman, Montana, where Trump will rally later today. So, Monica, Aaron just took us through what to expect from Arizona, but you also have some reporting on Harris's plans after these swing states. In fact, her and President Biden will hold an event together in Maryland. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, an official event, Ryan. So they're going to be appearing together in their capacity as the president and vice president of the United States. But certainly anything that they're doing right now takes on a real political overtone as well. They're going to be focusing, we're told, on lowering costs for Americans. This is something that both of them throughout the course of the administration have tried to focus as a real agenda item and priority, but they're going to be heading to Maryland to speak about that specifically. And it's going to come at an interesting time because we know that next week, as the vice president is getting ready for the Democratic National Convention, she's going to start laying out a couple of policy proposals that may differ a bit from President Biden's. And this is a space in an area where those close to the vice president say she knows that she needs to put her sort of own stamp on where she views certain things while respectfully walking a line of saying that she thinks President Biden and that their administration has done a decent amount of work in some areas, but that more could be done. So we expect to start to see that kind of roll out, but it'll be interesting to see the two of them together since they have been together at that most notably prisoner exchange return of the Americans at Joint Base Andrews last week, but we haven't really seen them in an event like this. So it will be notable for several reasons, of course.
It does beg the question, though, Monica, will we see the President Biden, out on the campaign trail? How is the Harris campaign planning to utilize the president as this race continues?
And they're navigating this delicately, as you can imagine, Ryan, because it's only been less than 3 weeks since President Biden exited the 2024 race. But in that time, the energy, the enthusiasm that Democrats have seen for Vice President Harris, they want to keep that momentum going. And they know that President Biden returning to the campaign trail raises more questions about his decision to leave and his decision now about the path forward and all of that. So I think they're going to have a role for him to play. He has said that he wants to be helpful ahead of the election, but I think it is going to be something that's a bit more limited and tailored to where they think he can be helpful on that messaging. One other area likely where we're going to see the president try to do what he can is maybe with some fundraising, and that's something that they can use as a tool in the months ahead as well.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Let's go to Vaughn now, who is in Montana, where Trump's first campaign appearance will be this week. It's not a swing state, as you know, Vaughn. It does have a very important Senate race there. But what does this tell us about the Trump campaign strategy that they would dedicate the candidate's precious time, the most valuable resource, on an event that's really probably more focused on winning back the Senate than winning the White House?
Right. I know this is wild. This is crazy. But there is a little bit of time till Election Day. Early voting doesn't begin in some key states like Minnesota and Virginia until September 20th. And so we're still a month and a half away. And I would anticipate that the Trump campaign would ramp up the amount of time that it is spending in the actual battleground states. And this week you saw him last weekend in Georgia, and then you saw him this week holding down at his Mar-a-Lago estate. But coming here to Montana, because also important to pushing the Trump agenda if he were to win the White House, Ryan would, of course, as you are all too familiar with, is understanding that Republican majorities in the U.S. House and the Senate are going to be absolutely crucial. And that's where Tim Sheehy is the Republican candidate here, who is running to take down incumbent Senator John Tester. And for Republicans, if they win the White House, and you have J.D. Vance, who would be the president of the Senate, could be the tie-breaking vote. All they would need to do is flip one seat, and that likely would be the state of West Virginia, where Senator Joe Manchin is retiring, and they believe Republican Governor Jim Justice, who is running to take his seat, is in a good position to win. But they would like to get at least one more seat, and Montana is a good place to go looking because, you know, it was back in 2020, there was another close Senate race where it was the popular Democratic Governor Steve Bullock who ran again here, but lost by 10 percentage points to now Republican Senator Steve Daines. So Republicans think that they have a good shot here against Jon Tester, who 6 years ago, we should note, did win this race by 4 percentage points. So that is why you are seeing Donald Trump here in Montana tonight.
But it is curious that this is how he chooses to spend his time, especially because he's just hasn't been on the campaign trail that much. He seemed to bristle at that question during the press conference yesterday when it was suggested to him that he hasn't been out there that much. Is he going to really start to ramp things up, or is the campaign just going to leave everything on J.D. Vance's shoulders when it comes to getting out there and actually meeting with voters?
Right, Ryan. There is nothing on the public schedule as of right now. No campaign events that we are aware of. He's doing a couple fundraisers here in Montana and down in Wyoming over the next 24 hours. But the question is, when does he really pick up that schedule? It has been very light since he announced his presidential bid in November of 2022. And I'll note that there was some criticism or questioning of his schedule earlier this year when he was running against Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and others in the Republican primary. And, you know, in the month leading up to the Iowa caucus, he only had 5 days in the state of Iowa on the campaign trail, yet he went and ran away with it. Of course, the juxtaposition of this race against a rising Kamala Harris, that's very, very different. And I would anticipate that you would see some of that money being spent and some of the time spent towards hitting the campaign trail. But as of right now, I think that is an open question mark that only Donald Trump and his team are going to be able to answer, Ryan.
Okay, Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Let's talk more about this now with Amy Walter, who is the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Amy, always great to talk to you, especially given the fact that this may have been the craziest month in politics that we've seen in some time, and that's saying something. But it does look like the race is reset to where it was earlier in the summer. It's pretty remarkable to think about everything that we've been through over the past couple of weeks, and then we're basically right back to where we started. What do you make of this lack of movement in the polls?
Well, I'd actually argue, Brian, there's been a great deal of movement. It just has been more of a seesaw, perhaps, is the way to think about it. So on the one hand, it is true, Kamala Harris has made up a lot of ground, that she's narrowed the gap between herself and Donald Trump. That was quite large, or was much larger when Biden was in the race. So if you look just at the national polling, where Harris is right now, somewhere around a point or so ahead of Trump, maybe a little bit more than that in the national polls. That's a 5-point shift from where things were just a month ago. And as you know, Ryan, in a political world that we live in these days, which is so polarized and so calcified around partisanship, 5 points is about as big of a movement as you could get. And 5 points can be the difference between winning and losing the presidency. At the same time, Donald Trump is in a better position than he was back at this point in 2020. Back at this point, he was down by 6 points in the national polls and trailing in every single one of those battleground states. So I think what we have, instead of saying we're sort of back to normal, we really, I think you put it this way, it's a reset. And essentially we're back to, if you think about this in sports terms, these are two very well-matched football teams for the last few months. It's the red team, the Trump team, that's been on the field. All of their team has been on the field, ready to go. The blue team has not. A lot of their members have been on, a lot of their players have been on the sidelines. Now, the burst of enthusiasm that Harris has brought to Democrats means that all of the Democratic squad is on the field. So now we're back to a place where this is going to be a game of inches, where these two very well-matched teams are fighting for those last couple of yards into the end zone.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the reset, and I think a lot of heads turned when your organization moved a number of these swing states out of the toss-up category and put them in the lean Republican category. You've now moved some of them back. The presidential races in Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada are now, once lean Republican, are now toss-up. Talk to me about the thinking behind that decision.
Sure. So back in early July, when we moved those into leaning Republican, Trump's lead in those states ranged from 5 to almost 7 points. A state like Georgia, a state that, as we know, Biden narrowly carried by about 10,000 votes, Trump was up by over 6 points. That is obviously a very difficult margin to make up as a candidate, especially if you're the incumbent candidate. You're very well known and already well defined. The fact that polls now have Georgia either tied or Trump is maybe up 1 or 2 points says this race is sort of reset. We're back to a 50-50 race. And we're seeing the same thing in Arizona and Nevada. What's happening is a lot of those voters who were parking themselves, maybe they were in third party, like they said they were supporting RFK Jr., or they said they didn't think they were going to vote, didn't know they were going to vote. They were undecided. Those folks have now moved over to Harris.
All right, let's talk about the issues and one issue in particular that could potentially play a big role in this election. And former President Trump got some attention for his claim that abortion isn't going to be a factor. That's his take. Listen to what he said yesterday.
I think the abortion issue has been very much tempered down. And I've answered, I think, very well in the debate, and it seems to be much less of an issue. I think the abortion issue has been taken down many notches. I don't think it's a big factor anymore, really.
Says it's not a big factor. It's going to be on the ballot in 6 states. Six states already have measures to expand this on the ballot. Is this wishful thinking on Trump's part?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, listen, he does have something of an advantage in that he's not tied as closely to some of the positions that, say, other Republicans who've lost in the last cycle since the Dobbs decision have been. So some of those were folks running for the Senate or Congress who said things like there are no exceptions allowed. They've been on the record having a voting record that was much more conservative on abortion. But remember, what Democrats do have now in Kamala Harris is somebody who can excite the base that was excited about abortion, but not particularly excited about Biden. I think she helps to re-energize those voters. The other is J.D. Vance, and his positions on abortion make things more complicated for Trump. Now, obviously, Trump is the principal. He's the one who gets to say this is the position that the White House, that the administration is taking. But it's harder for him, I think, to distance himself from those issues when we keep hearing about positions that J.D. Vance has either taken or things that he has said in the past about the issue.
Okay, Amy, it's going to be a fun couple of weeks here as we head into the sprint to election day. We appreciate you being here. Next, Iran's interference ramping up. A new report on Tehran's latest move to influence the presidential election and exploit the deep divisions in this country. Plus, no more time and no more excuses. That's the message from the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar, calling on Israel and Hamas to resume ceasefire talks next week. We're live in Israel next. This is Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Microsoft is out with a new warning about Iran's increasing malicious cyber activities as it seeks to influence the 2024 presidential elections. According to their report, Iranian groups are creating websites masquerading as legitimate news sites aimed at stoking voter outrage on issues like the Israel-Hamas war, LGBTQ rights, and even about the candidates themselves. Microsoft also found a cyber group with ties to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps sent a spear phishing email to a high-ranking official on the presidential campaign. And days later, that same group unsuccessfully attempted to log into an account belonging to a former presidential candidate. Joining me now is the author of that Microsoft report, Clint Watts. He's also an NBC News national security analyst. So, Clint, this is fascinating. Tell us more about your report and how Iran is targeting elections here in the United States.
Yeah, so just to update everybody where we're at, this is the third of 4 reports that we'll do. And since the second report, which came out in April, we've seen a significant change. Russia has been constant in its influence activities. Going into election 2024, you could say they've been constant in 2020, 2016. That is what they do. But the Iranians in the last 3 months have picked up significantly in 2 key aspects. One, developing websites. So why do they do this? It's so they can launder information or news that they fabricate in a way that could influence the election in terms of what the candidates are saying or doing, but also the conduct of it. Separately, it's starting what we've seen many times in the last few years from Iran, which is a series of cyber campaigns. As you mentioned there, spear phishing or going after many targets hoping someone will click on a link and they would gain access to the account. They could do this for things like espionage, but it could also be for hack and leak operations, similar to what we saw in election 2016. I'd also note, though, this is consistent with what we've seen in Iran, the Iranians doing to Israel, an election in Bahrain. They did this to the Albanian government a couple of years ago, and we also saw them get quite active as the election approached about this time in 2020.
And earlier this year, the U.S. Intelligence Committee warned that Russia was trying to influence the election, but that was in favor of former President Trump. Is there any sign that the Iranians are trying to boost a particular candidate or party?
Right now, what it looks like is the Iranians are trying to gain access, so it's hard to fully understand their intent. But what we do know is since election 2020, and due to the constant standoff they've had with the United States and basically its conduct in the regional wars, particularly the situation with Israel, they've taken a very aggressive tone, very aggressive in the sense of trying to create chaos in and around the election. In 2020, one of the campaigns they run was a fake email going out to voters, trying to scare them about the polling places, impersonating the Proud Boys, essentially trying to make it look like there could be violence if you went to vote. We imagine that kind of activity will pick up all the way to Election Day. In part, it could be to influence around the candidate, but it also is just to send a retaliatory sort of signal to the U.S. for what they perceive as grievance based on activities going on in the Middle East even today.
So what would your advice be to voters, somebody that's watching today? How do they not be influenced by this type of an attack?
There's a couple things they can do. First, just on the cyber front, two-factor authentication, making sure you update all of your applications. That's critical. Knowing what you're clicking on and who the source of what you're clicking on, that's critical. The spear phishing part that you mentioned at the beginning is what we're always trying to avoid. On the influence side, when you're on social media, there's two things to always look for. Who, as in the person or the organization, is the source of the information that you're reviewing or reading. If you don't know that source, you shouldn't be too trustful of it. And then the second part is, even if you do have a source, let's say it's an anonymous sort of source, do you know where they are physically in the world? If we're on this show here, what do we always say? We're in Washington, D.C. or New York City. If someone won't say who they are and where they're at, they're oftentimes obfuscating who they are and where they're at. So you shouldn't put too much trust in it. And the last part is part of what Microsoft's doing is rolling out content credentials. And part of this is trying to make sure that people know the source of the information, whether it's authentic or maybe it's using new AI tools. And all that as part of a tech accord we've signed on with all the social media companies that if we see anything related to election interference, we'll make sure and try and take that content down and partner with other technology companies.
Okay, huge issue impacting this upcoming election. Clint Watts, thank you for that. We appreciate it. And it's not just Iran's cyber activities we're watching. As the U.S. and the Middle East remain on edge, waiting for Iran's military retaliation after the killings of two militant leaders from Hamas and Hezbollah. But even as the region braces for a military escalation, the Biden administration is trying to once again revive ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas. Yesterday, President Biden, along with the leaders of Egypt and Qatar, released a joint statement demanding the two sides agree to a ceasefire framework that was outlined more than 2 months ago. The leaders also urged negotiators from Israel and Hamas to resume talks next week to close all remaining gaps and begin implementing the agreement. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber is in Israel, and she joins me now. So, Ellison, what's the reaction been in Israel to this joint statement calling for this deal on a ceasefire? Does it feel like it's now or never for a ceasefire deal?
On the second question, hard to say. On the first bit, Israeli officials have actually been pretty to the point in their reaction to this. Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu have said, OK, we will send a delegation. We will send our negotiators to either Cairo or Doha on Thursday, on the 15th, and we will show up. We have not yet heard from Hamas, but I'll give a little bit of a caveat that now the top leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, is known to be underground in that labyrinth of tunnels in the Gaza Strip, and oftentimes it's been reported that it takes a couple of days for messages to get to him and then to get back out, and that's been the case throughout ceasefire negotiations, because even prior to his elevated position, he was known to have a final say and veto power on ceasefire negotiations. So in terms of is it now or never, this is an incredibly forceful statement, and it's a big deal to see it come from all three of the mediators involved in this, right? But they I think acknowledged in that letter, too, that there are going to be some obvious gaps. They framed it as saying there are still implementation details that need to be sorted out. But ultimately, the framework that they appear to be talking about, saying this is what we'd finalized, is something that had been approved by the UN Security Council, or supported by them, rather, and something that President Biden had laid out in a speech at the White House on May 31st. And there have been a lot of changes to this entire situation since then. I mean, not only did we see top Hamas officials and other high-profile figures involved in the tense escalations going on in this region, not only did we see many of those senior leaders killed of late, there was also a time in between May 31st and other negotiations where, after it seemed like things were getting close to a deal, Prime Minister Netanyahu put out what he said were 4 non-negotiable points that seemed to still contradict with what that framework was initially. One of them being that Netanyahu said it would be non-negotiable that any deal must allow Israel to return to fighting to achieve their wartime objectives. That's something Hamas has been very clear that for them, ultimately, they want to see a permanent ceasefire at the end of it. It's also what President Biden said would happen in that May 31st framework agreement. There's so far been no indication that Netanyahu has gone back on his desire to be able to ultimately continue fighting and just have a temporary truce. But this is the first time we've seen these mediators take this more assertive position of saying, OK, we're frustrated, and in different words, right? But that's essentially the undertones here, right, Ryan? They're saying we're frustrated. We have a deal. Listen, come and let's talk. And they added this caveat that said, if necessary, the mediators, meaning Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, will put forward some sort of binding proposal, given what we know about what each side has said they want. And at that point, that's something where one Israeli longtime hostage negotiator we've spoken to a lot in the last week has said that's where, in his view, they then need to say, take it or leave it. And then what would the next step be to sort of force Israel and or Hamas to say, OK, fine, we'll agree to this.
Okay.
Ryan?
Sounds like a lot needs to be worked out still. Ellison, thank you so much for that report from Israel. Yeah. Next, a perfect storm. How extreme weather is fueling extreme price hikes in home insurance across the country, and what state and federal officials can do as the number of billion-dollar disasters climbs. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. From heat waves and hurricanes to fires and floods. This year, the U.S. has already seen $19 billion disasters, according to data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's double the annual average in the years since 1980. Of course, the year isn't even close to over. And remember, August through October is when we usually see the worst of hurricane season. And as climate change fuels a stark increase in extreme weather, it is also driving up the cost of homeowners insurance. In recent decades, Texas has seen more billion-dollar disasters than any other state, causing the price of homeowners insurance premiums there to skyrocket. Scott Friedman, senior investigative reporter at NBC's owned station in Dallas-Fort Worth, has more.
Take your tornado precautions, get as low as you can.
There's no doubt destructive weather,
4 tornadoes took lives and destroyed homes and businesses,
is part of living in DFW.
Along the hardest hit streets, not a home is untouched.
The devastation is widespread here.
Melinda Clifton has seen hail take out her roof 3 times in 2 decades. Homeowners insurance paid her claims, but then came a bill that hit like a hurricane.
$8,800 for 1 year.
The year before, Clifton paid about $2,600 for homeowners insurance. Now the insurance company wanted more than 3 times that amount.
What did you think when you saw that number?
I said, it's an unimaginable number. I don't understand it.
With insurance increasing her house payment by hundreds of dollars a month, she questioned if she could afford to stay.
I thought, am I going to have to sell my home? The home I raised my children in.
Clifton's not the only one stunned by sky-high rates. NBC5 Investigates analyzed new data from the Texas Department of Insurance. We discovered last year alone, Texas homeowners insurance companies asked the state to approve double-digit rate increases more than 150 times. So far this year, they've asked for 74 more. One company requested a 73% increase. And the number of double-digit increase requests has gone up 560% since 2014.
How long can Texas consumers hang on in an environment like that?
The reality, Scott, is they can't. If these rates keep skyrocketing like this, we're going to see a big impact all across the housing market.
Ware Wendell heads a nonpartisan consumer group that advocates for lower rates.
We are in the midst of an insurance crisis in the state of Texas and actually all across the country. Insurance companies are jacking up rates through the roof.
Insurance companies insist the increases are necessary to survive in Texas, which has seen more billion-dollar weather disasters than any other state recently. 179 climate-related disaster events with losses above $1 billion since 1980, according to NOAA research. Even an afternoon hailstorm can cause $1 billion in insurance losses.
It's reality. And it is the reality of the risk and loss.
Beeman Floyd is a lobbyist who represents some of the state's biggest insurance companies.
Is this really just recovering losses, or is this price gouging?
It is recovering losses. When we look at and it's not even recovering losses, it's catching up.
Floyd says insurers face a triple whammy in Texas. Damaging storms, more homes being built in areas prone to wind and hail, and inflation driving up the cost of replacement items like roof shingles. Over the last 5 years, Texas insurance companies say they've paid more in claims than they've collected in premiums.
Is the insurance industry in a crisis in Texas today?
We are in a very tight market. The reason I would not characterize it as a crisis is because we have the regulatory elasticity to be able to respond to the math.
What he means by elasticity is Texas is a file and use state. That means insurers can request a rate increase and begin charging that new rate even before the state formally approves it, allowing insurance companies to quickly charge more when they need to. Without that, Floyd says Texas could end up like California or Florida, where some insurers are leaving the state.
Are we on the verge of that happening here?
Not that I see. Not that I see.
But some fear it's homeowners who will be driven out if there's no end to the rate increases, which may keep insurance companies here at prices consumers can't afford.
We want insurance companies to make a profit, just not an excessive profit.
Wendell's group wants the state to end the file and use system and switch to what's called prior approval, where the State Department of Insurance would have to approve rate increases in advance.
We have a very weak regulatory system right now. It's really oriented towards the insurance companies.
Insurers point out Texas once had prior approval more than 20 years ago, and they say it drove companies away.
And at one time, we were down to a single-digit number of companies writing homeowners insurance in the great state of Texas.
This fall, Texas lawmakers will hold hearings about how to address the rising costs. In the meantime, we went to talk to the man Governor Abbott appointed to head the state agency that advocates for insurance consumers, to ask if there's anything they can do to help keep costs down.
How bad is this marketplace? How bad is it for consumers?
It's pretty rough.
But David Balduke says his Office of Public Insurance Counsel has scrutinized recent double-digit rate increases and hasn't seen many that were excessive, because the losses insurance companies have incurred have been so big.
So you're saying the majority of these huge increases that we're seeing are justified?
As far as we can tell, they're justified by the expected losses.
His best advice to consumers, shop aggressively for the lowest rate. That's what Melinda Clifton eventually did, finding another company that was able to provide insurance for about $3,800. That's about 45% more than she used to pay, but far less than the $8,800 bill she was facing.
I don't understand what's happening with the insurance industry.
And our colleagues at NBC5 station KXAS tell us that the Texas Insurance Commissioner that approves or denies rate increases turned down a request for an interview. But the agency says that it rigorously scrutinizes all filings to make sure that increases are justified. And our thanks to Scott and the NBC team in Dallas-Fort Worth for that excellent reporting. Next, we head out to the Hill. We'll talk to a congressman who also happens to be a meteorologist about the climate crisis and the race for the White House. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back to Meet the Press Now, and I'm joined now by Congressman Eric Sorensen, who is a Democrat from Illinois. We have a lot to talk about, Congressman. I appreciate you being here. But let's start first with the Harris campaign. You were among those who called on President Biden to step aside. What is it about Vice President Harris's vision for the Oval Office. How could it be different than President Biden's, and what's your overall take on the start of her campaign?
Well, Ryan, it's great to be with you. First and foremost, I have a recollection of the first time that I voted for a president. I remember the feeling that I had when I voted for Barack Obama in 2008. I felt like I was doing something so important for our country. We need that to occur again. And this needs to be at the highest level of importance, especially for young people, especially, as we're looking forward in a climate crisis. We need to make sure that we're making the best decisions. And I'll tell you, with a Midwesterner on the ticket, someone who has served our country proudly, somebody who was a teacher, a coach, a union member, just an all-around good dad, this is a ticket for everyone.
And Vice President Harris has been the de facto Democratic nominee for a couple of weeks now. In that time, though, she's already started to walk back some of the positions that she took in 2020 when she ran for president the first time around. Does that concern you at all? And should voters know why she changed those positions and how that could impact decisions she makes in the future?
Everyone should be evolving in our understanding of how things work. It's okay to clarify positions. It's okay to change your mind as you learn new things. I'm a meteorologist. I'm one of the only meteorologists in Congress. But also, I'll tell you, at the very beginning of my learning of what was going on, I was a climate skeptic. I was one of those people myself that said that there's no way that humans could be causing this. But it wasn't until I did enough research and I looked at some of the data, and the data was pointing in the right direction, that I had an aha moment. And then I have now focused in the past 25 years of talking to people, talking to everyday Americans about this. And I think it is healthy for people to clarify themselves as they learn new things.
And do you think that there should be more than one debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump? Is one enough?
I think the more we as Americans get a chance to look, I think it is best. But also understanding here, there is such a contrast between both of the people that are running for president today. One clearly has a vision to take us back, and one has a vision to take us forward.
Well, you talked about your history as a meteorologist, a television meteorologist in local news, I should say, as a former local news reporter. We have that in common. It's interesting because we've been clobbered here in the Northeast as the remnants of Tropical Storm Debbie have tore through. There were tornado watches here in the Washington, D.C. area today, tornado warnings, in fact. First of all, you talk about your metamorphosis from climate change critic to someone who firmly believes it now. Are these storms, the frequency of them, how often they're happening, the intensity of them, the fact that they're happening so early? Do you attribute that, at least in part, to climate change? And what should the country be doing to try and stop this encroachment of climate change on an everyday basis?
As a meteorologist, we have to look at the ferocity of these storms, the timing of them, the frequency. They are going up because we're putting more heat, we're putting more energy into the system. We're seeing record numbers and record temperatures of water temperatures. That fuels the fire, if you will, for these types of storms. And as we continue to look out at what's going on with cooler water in the Pacific, with a La Nina that is developing out in the Pacific, as that water cools, it tends to promote hurricane strength in the East Coast. And so, look, just yesterday, NOAA revised its projections for the remainder of hurricane season. Now a 90% chance that we're going to have a much more active hurricane season. And so we need to make sure that we're ready, especially with increased risk up the eastern seaboard. And also it means that the federal government needs to respond swiftly after disasters like what we're seeing right now to make sure that basic needs are met, but then also to make sure that we can quickly revive commerce and industry.
And we just played a pretty lengthy piece from our colleagues in Texas about the insurance crisis that they're dealing with there and how natural disasters are just causing a skyrocketing cost when it comes to home insurance costs. Obviously, each state is handling this differently. There's a different toll for those of us that live in Virginia and Maryland than there would be for folks that live in states that are in the tropics and in areas where hurricanes are more prevalent. But should there be a federal response to this? Should the federal government do something to try and equalize the cost of insurance to try and make it not so burdensome?
Right. I mean, just look at what's happened in Florida. My own brother is a resident of Sarasota and went 3 days without being able to get out of his own home. And then he called me up and he said, Eric, he said, flood insurance is incredibly expensive. And he goes, I'm not even in a floodplain, yet the water came up to my door. We are going to need to tackle these challenges because it's not just people that live in the tropics. It's people that live here. We had 14 inches of rain in Fulton County, Cuba, Illinois. I just went and talked with residents there last week. Some of the folks there don't even have homeowners insurance. We need to make sure that the federal government is helping not just along the coast, but up into the heartland, because there is an economic impact. And we know, unfortunately, it's going to get worse as time goes on.
We have to go, Congressman, but now that you're not a practicing meteorologist anymore, do you still get blamed when it rains? Or do people...
So many members of Congress are saying, Eric, can I fly through Dallas today? I'm proud.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it, Congressman. I appreciate you being here. Next, flight of fancy. Donald Trump seems to confuse two California politicians while telling a tale of a near-death experience in a helicopter that never happened. You're watching Meet the Press now.
Well, I know Willie Brown very well. In fact, I went down in a helicopter with him. We thought maybe this is the end. We were in a helicopter going to a certain location together, and there was an emergency landing. This was not a pleasant landing, and Willie was, he was a little concerned. So I know him pretty well. I mean, I haven't seen him in years. But he told me terrible things about her. But this is what you're telling me anyway.
Welcome back. That was former President Donald Trump recounting what appeared to be a harrowing near-death experience during his news conference yesterday, except it seems it really didn't happen the way he described it. Willie Brown is the former mayor of San Francisco who dated Kamala Harris in the 90s. He told the San Francisco Chronicle that he's never been in a helicopter with Donald Trump. Trump appears to have confused Willie Brown with Jerry Brown, the former governor of California. Then President Trump did ride in a helicopter with Jerry Brown in 2018, but a representative for Brown says there was no emergency landing, and they also didn't discuss Kamala Harris. Joining me now on our panel, Capitol Hill reporter for The Washington Post, Rhonda Colvin, former Democratic mayor of Ithaca, New York, and president and CEO of the American Way, Savante Myrick, and Republican strategist Brad Todd. So, Rhonda, when I saw President Trump go down this road with Willie Brown and Jerry Brown, it didn't really make sense at the time. And I kept thinking to myself, if this was Joe Biden answering this question during that window of time where everyone was asking whether or not he had the competency to remain president, there would have been an unbelievable amount of outrage. Is Donald Trump getting the same treatment that Joe Biden is getting when it comes to something like this?
It doesn't appear to be as widespread as it was. That's an excellent point, because you would expect that he would have gotten the same treatment that Biden did. You know, Biden was stumbling over words, but there was nothing to the degree of the tape you just showed. So it is a little concerning. I don't think that the former president is getting that same attention on the things that he is saying. That may change, though. I mean, we still have a debate to go, you know, when he is not in the forefront of the news as well, and he probably won't be during the week of the DNC. He usually says or does things that people may find concerning. So I don't think it's over yet, but no, he's not seeming to get that same treatment.
Isn't it also a problem that it's not just that he mixed up the names, he just outright lied about the experience, right? And there doesn't seem to be an accounting for that.
Yeah, it doesn't. It also sort of shows, and we saw this throughout that entire news conference, that he is a bit frustrated right now, that it appears that his campaign, even though it was reported that, you know, Democrats were trying to push Biden out, you would expect that the Trump campaign may have been prepared for a switch. But it doesn't seem that they're finding their footing with this switch yet. And I think that story and all the other things that he said as well are sort of illustrative of the fact that they are still trying to figure out their strategy right now in going up against the Harris momentum.
Brad, if Joe Biden had told that story a week after the debate, what would you have thought of it?
Well, I don't know that if Joe Biden was telling a lot of stories at that time that he wasn't performing very well on. I think the bigger issue is that Kamala Harris is not doing press conferences. She's not taking questions. She said she might do an interview where she takes questions maybe later this month, at the end of the month.
We'll get to that, and we'll talk all about that. And you're right, that's an issue that we have to adjudicate. But this specific thing, the cognitive function of Joe Biden was such a massive issue for quite a long time, and all the same criticism. He'd mess up names. He'd tell stories that weren't 100% accurate. Republicans pillared him for that. Democrats pillared him for that.
I have a critique for yesterday's press conference, and that's that it's not focused near enough on what Kamala Harris has said she would do as president. Donald Trump, if he's going to win this election, he has to make it about what Kamala Harris has said she would do. She ran for president in 2020. She said every left-wing California thing in the book. He has to remind people about it. He has to be laser focused. But
what about the lying and mixing up names and things like that?
He has to be laser focused on her record. And I agree with Rhonda that has not seemed to grasp that as his central strategy yet at this point. It's more about her personally. He has to get off that. He has to make it back about what she said she would do as president.
So, Savante, are Democrats not talking about this enough?
No, we're not talking about it enough. And I think, Brad, my colleague here, just said all the words that are true. He is not grasping what's important. He is not focused on what's important. He is not disciplined. I don't think that was just one press conference. I'm not sure he can. I think his hearing is slipping, to be honest. If you watch the press conference, it's pretty clear that he cannot hear as well as he did. Why is he not wearing hearing aids? Is it vanity? He is not as focused as he was even 8 years ago. He is, to be honest, a little bit stranger than he was 8 years ago. His rambling, he's always rambled. It is true that Donald Trump has a liar's advantage, right? Everybody knows that he's a liar. Everybody knows that he fibs, that he exaggerates, that he's a developer, he's a showman. So in 2015, he would fib and exaggerate. And I think that is hiding some amount of cognitive decline. It is clear that he is not functioning at the level he was 8 years ago. But because we are so used to his lying and exaggeration, we are, I think, missing the plot. Something seems to be wrong with a 78-year-old candidate for president.
We don't know. We don't have official records that show cognitive decline. This is just your opinion, but I take your point. Yes. But to Brad's point, Donald Trump did put himself out there. He answered questions for more than an hour. That's something Kamala Harris hasn't done since she took the nomination.
Yeah.
Does she need to do that, and how soon?
I think she needs to do it for sure in the next week or so. I think there's a pretty good reason she has not, which is that...
But why is she getting away with it? Why is the press letting her get away with it?
Well, we're not letting her get away with it. We're talking about it right now.
Yeah, and here's why I think the press...
conversation.
Well, here's why I think the press is letting her get away with it.
We're not letting her get away with it.
Right.
I've talked about it every day this week.
We're not going to show up and cover her events if she doesn't take
Let's be honest about it. Let's be honest.
I just want to make this clear.
Let's be very honest.
No one is letting her off the hook for this.
That's right.
Her events are on television without question.
But Donald Trump does a million events where he doesn't take questions. That's not fair.
But here's the context. Here's the context. Because we didn't just fall out of a coconut tree. What's the context here? The context is, if somebody doesn't do a press conference for 2 weeks, you ask yourself why. Is it because they're hiding something? Is it because they're afraid of answering questions? What has the last 2 weeks in Kamala Harris's life been like? The most intense of any American politician ever. This is the latest change in a party ticket. She raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in just 2 weeks. She had to pick a vice president, and she's drawing record crowds. She has been busy.
She's not.
It's not that she's hiding. It's not that she's hiding a cognitive decline of a man in the 70s.
To let her have a free thought.
Okay, if you think she's afraid, I would be.
Every single event Donald Trump does has a teleprompter. I'm not going to get into this whole teleprompter.
And he doesn't use it all the time.
That's not true.
Well, she will do. I predict that she will, of course, do sit-down interviews and press conferences.
She has a history of flubbing press conferences. She has a history of saying crazy things. She has left-wing things.
That's
why they're not letting her.
You can accuse Kamala Harris of saying crazy things at a press conference?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Left-wing crazy things.
All right, we're going to move on because this is we're not making any progress here. Rhonda, let's go to a different conversation, which also may go off the rails, and that's about the debate. Initially, Donald Trump said any time, any place. Then he said he wasn't going to debate. Now he wants to debate 3 different times on different networks. It does look like we're going to have at least one debate on ABC in early September. What do you think it's going to look like, and what could be the outcome of that?
Well, I think just looking at the career of Kamala Harris, she doesn't have a problem debating. I covered her on the Hill when she was on Senate Judiciary, when she would question in her line of questioning, specifically when she was a part of the confirmation process of Trump's, the first members of his cabinet. She was pretty tough. Everyone kind of braced themselves when she started questioning. We saw how she performed when she was up against the former Vice President Pence. She also was a primary candidate. So I think she's sort of well-versed in how to strategize a debate, make it work for her. But I think when any candidate goes up against former President Trump, there is going to be a level of strategy because he is somewhat of an unpredictable character that you don't know what type of Trump you might get at that debate. So I'm interested to see when we do get to this debate how she'll perform. Is she, dialing anything down? Is she dialing anything up? She's really going to have to figure out how she can land that because it is now, we're days away from the election, under 100 days, and by then we'll be weeks away. So that's going to be an incredibly important debate. And we'll see if there are the other two that he mentioned he wants to do. But at least one is on the books.
Is one enough, Brad? We're less than a minute, but is one enough?
I think that he'll do as many as she will do.
Yeah. And Savante, what about you?
I think she'll do more. I think the split screen only works for the Democratic Party between her and this, near octogenarian. And she is an extremely sharp and focused and disciplined questioner. The debates will go very, very well for Kamala Harris.
As you can see, I'm a little spunky on a Friday, so I apologize if we got a little too fiery here today. But that's part of the game, right? Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all being here. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much, Rhonda, Savante, and Brad. And thanks. We're going to be back next week with more Meet the Press Now. But NBC News Now coverage continues with Yamiche Alcindor, who's in for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.